Hello, this is Randy with Excel for Freelancers, and in today's training video we're going to be creating a contact manager that can be shared and used simultaneously by users around the world without using Excel's shared workbook feature. It's going to be a fantastic training. Okay, let's get started. I'm really excited to show you this one because there are so many advantages to be able to share a workbook without using the shared workbook feature. And let's just go over, for those of you that don't know or need a little refresher course, the shared feature workbook is here. And basically when you select this option, it will tell you it allows multiple people to share a workbook at the same time. And that is what we're trying to achieve, but we want to achieve that without using this feature. And why do we want to do that? Well, as it says here, the workbook should be saved to a network location. Well, I want to share it with people anywhere in the world, assuming that we have some sort of a shared folder, and there's so many great ways to get shared folders, and we'll go over a few of those like Dropbox, Google Drive, OneDrive, and there's a few other great, but that's easy and free. The shared folder is the easy part. So I don't want to use a network, right? That means, you know, a hard network would be like computers in your office. And also workbooks containing tables cannot be shared, and tables is something that we use. There's also lots and lots and lots of other limitations with the shared workbook feature, with this shared work feature. Let's go over some of those limitations because that's going to move right into why we want to do this. I made a list here. You cannot create an Excel table, insert or delete. These are things that you cannot do with the standard Excel shared workbook. Merge cells or split merge cells, and we want to do that. Protect, unprotect inside the code. In fact, one of my favorites, you can't use advanced filters inside a shared workbook, which is quite a shame. You cannot use text to columns, group, outline data, insert automatic subtotals, tons and tons and tons of these features that are really core and very important to Excel, simply we cannot do inside a shared workbook. Well, today we're going to create a solution, and I'm going to show you how to create a solution that allows you to share your workbook data with anybody in the world, with as many people as you want at the same time, with this unique and incredible feature that I'm going to show you, and it's not too difficult to achieve. So follow along, and I'm going to show you exactly how to achieve that. And one of the things that we're going to be doing is we're going to create a contact manager. This is just a simple program, and basically what it's going to allow us to do is create new contacts and save those contacts inside our list. So all we have to do is save it, and we can put address, and then they're automatically saved down at the bottom of this list. We can select on a contact here and update the address. And then we can click update, and it'll update the contact here. We have the ability to refresh the contacts, delete. We can delete a contact. So if we want to click on here, we can delete the contact, and it'll delete it automatically. Now, I'm going to go over that with you, but we're going to go over that quick. The idea is basically that in this particular mini application that I've created, we can create new contacts, we can update contacts, and we can delete contacts. So the program is very basic, but the idea behind this is that the data here gets saved and can be shared, so that there could be 100 people using this workbook, or actually a copy of it, and all doing the same thing at the same time and sharing their data, and then their data will also appear on this list. So that is what we want to achieve. Now, the important thing that we understand is, you know, Excel is a spreadsheet program, so we kind of have to get that out of our mind and think of it more as an application. And any true application has what we call a front end and a back end. And the front end is just what you're looking at here. It's basically the ability to enter data, update data, or delete data, and it's what the user sees, and that's called a front end. And what we have to do is we have to get out of our mind that the front end and the back end are the same, right? So what you're looking at here is not the back end, okay? The back end is this here, and that's just basically a table. Right? And this is actually a copy of the back end. The true back end is simply a table, and I'll show you what that back end looks like. Let's go ahead and into our file folder here, and we'll go ahead and browse into and pull that up so we can see our specific folder that we're looking at, and that would be here under the shared workbook. Okay, so we have a customer data. This is our database, so we've separated it. And what does that look like? It looks just like a table, right? It's nothing more than a table. And so the idea is here that we have to separate the front end and the back end. And the idea is that that back end, we have to link to that back end. So let's go ahead and close this. All that this back end is a simple table. When we close that, okay, and when we go back into contacts and we add a new contact, let's go ahead and add a new contact. We'll call this person Jasmine Smith. Let's see, Smith, okay. And we give them a address, 12345 Main Street, okay, and a city, Los Angeles. And now we want to save that, right? And we'll see it saved down here. But what we're really doing is I'm saving to the database, and then I'm pulling it and I'm putting it back up here. So if we go ahead and we pull that database up one more time, let's go into the recents, look into that customer, and you'll see down here is our new. So every new one gets added to this separate Excel sheet, and that's important because it is this database that the other users will link into, and I'm going to show you how that is done, of course. And then what we want to do is we want to actually bring the data back into here. So there's actually three tables. There's three tables. So let's go over those three tables. One is the list. Now this is not your original data, and the reason that this is not is because I want to give you the ability to sort, to filter data, and I want you to do that here, right? Sometimes, you know, in my prior videos we have one-click sort. We can click on a heading and sort it. We have the ability to filter, so I want to give you that ability. And we can do that if you look at my older videos, you know, one-click sorting, inline filtering, and things like that. As long as this isn't the original data, we can do that. So I want to put the data separate. I want to separate the data, and this is your database. So the idea is to separate the front end and the back end. We've done that here. So that means when you sort it or you filter it, we can have that. The idea is that I want to keep this table probably hidden, right? And out of the way, so that the original data is never touched, right? Because when we filter it, we don't want that touched. And I want to make sure that this is always synced up. I want to make sure this is synced up with the database in our folder. That is the folder. That is that folder, okay? So I want to make sure that this customer data is always synced up. And let's go ahead and delete this, and I'm going to create it again. So let's go ahead and show you how that would look. Let's go ahead and delete that everywhere. That's a new Dropbox feature. So well, let's go ahead and create a copy of this, and I'll show you how that would work. So what we'll do is we'll take this, right, and then I'm going to save it. And then what I'll do is I'm going to also save it as. So we're going to create a new workbook, multiple workbook, and we'll save it at, let's just call it Shared Workbook 2. And then we want to differentiate between this one and the old one. So let's just put a 2 here so we can clearly see which is which. Now, let's go ahead and, you know what, let me freeze this column 2 because I want to be able to scroll up. And so we can do that. That's going to be very, very helpful. So let's go ahead and freeze that. And now we can scroll up. And let's go ahead and pull up the previous one, which is, you know, without the 2, our original, which is right here. Okay, so now we have 2 open, and now let's go ahead and view them side by side. So we'll go ahead and arrange them, and let's call it vertically. And we don't need this one open anymore. Let's close that, and let's go ahead and review these again. View them vertical, okay. Okay, so now we've got 2 open. Now we see our original is here, and our second one is here. Okay, and to do that, what we have already done, and I'll show you how that was done, is I need to know where the database is for this, right? So we've browsed it, and we know where it is, and all we've done is selected, here is the database, okay? So that's important, and that's already done for both files. So that is the only thing you would require your users to do, is make sure you link up. Now, if you have a larger program, you will want to have a separate database for each, and it's just because it's faster. You don't need to. In other words, let's say you have contacts, you have invoices, you have accounting, or you have, I would put a separate Excel file for each of them, because the smaller that Excel file is, the quicker it opens, the quicker it updates, and the quicker it saves. And speed is an issue here. So I would have separate ones, right? And then you would just link them separately. So let's go back into our original, which is here, workbook, without the two. Let's go ahead and add a new contact. And let's just call this person K. Smith. Okay, we can do without the additional, and we'll save it. All right, so now we've saved it in this one, and we have the contact saved messages. Now I want to go back into this one, and remember, we have the database linked, and let's look down here. There's nothing here, right? Jasmine Smith, K. Smith, and this one, right, is 19, right? So now what I want to do is I want to refresh the data, and you can put this on a timer. So I'm going to click Refresh Contacts, and now all we do is look down here, and we see it's here. So, and this would, of course, would happen on separate computers around the world, right? So the idea is that it just moved all the way from here to there. And now let's go ahead and update Kate Smith. Let's go update on this one. Okay, let's pick two and let's update. Now let's say this user has added address. Let's say we add Los Angeles as a city, right? And then we click our update contact on workbook 2. Now we move back to workbook 1 and we do the same thing. And we refresh the data, refresh contacts, and we go back down, right? And here, K. Smith, Los Angeles. So we scroll up here. So you see how it works? It works both ways. Now picture this all around the world. You have a program, you build a program that acts as a powerful database, front end and back end, and users can use your program around the world. You could have 10 users in different cities, and they can all be working on the same application at the same time. Well, these are not really the same application. It's basically a duplicate of it, but it's not actually the same Excel file. Now, that is the difference. With shared workbooks, they're actually working on the same file, and Excel was never designed for that. That is the reason there's so many issues with shared workbooks. It was never designed with that, and even with all the limitations, you get crashes, you get network failures, there are so many issues with this. And now, the important thing is that, okay, if you look in this file, I'm in a Dropbox, okay? That's important. You want to be in a shared file. So if you have a Dropbox and you have a shared folder, it's critical. You do need a shared folder, of course. We need to be able to share this data. But what you can do here, let's say you don't want, I have it in the, let's go ahead and go back where we had the original folder, which is here. So you could only see this file. This is the only file that needs to be shared. We don't need all of these other files. We only need to share the database. So only the database files need to be in that shared folder, and that shared folder should be shared with all the users. I'm using Dropbox. Google Drive would work too. Mega, I have, OneDrive could work as well. As long as it's a shared folder among your users, you can use it, and it has to be sync. In other words, when I make an update, that sync has to be automatic, so it should become automatic, and it works really fantastic. Let's go ahead and show you how we did that. Let's go ahead and close out workbook 2, and we'll just work with 1. You've seen how it handles. So now we can go ahead and get under the hood and see how we actually have done this. We have 2 hidden columns, as we usually do in most of the shared workbooks, because that's where we keep our code from. So let's go ahead and show you what we have there. Not too much, just a few things. So let's go ahead and go over that. When we select a row, we use code, and we just as we've done in many other videos, which you can see, where the selected row will always appear in B1. So when we change that, it's going to go. So that we use with our conditional formatting to highlight that. And we've been over that many times before, but let's go ahead and show you under the manage rules. Well, we've got a lot of ones we don't need here, but basically just some old, we can delete those. We have just two rules here. We've got the alternate rows, which we use in the table, and we have the highlighted row, which basically says, if B1 is the row, then that's the one we use. So that is the one that allows us to highlight the selected row. We also have the selected contact ID, and all this does is it's going to put some code that tells us what is the ID of the contact that we're currently working with this. And this is going to help us when we need to update that. We'll need to know what row. We have used a max to figure out what the next contact ID, and I'll go over that with you. And we need to know what the row is of the current selected. So if we update that, if I update that, I need to know what update. Remember, this row below is not our database, right? Our database is on sheet 2 here. So we need to know. So for example, if we're working with Frank Fretters, ID number 5, it's telling us our database row is row 6 of the database. So when we go into customer database, we will see row 6 is Frank. So that's the one we want. That's the one we want to work with. So that when we make a change to that, if we make the change to the notes, small change, and we click update, we need to know what row we update, and that's going to be row 6. So when we click update, we know automatically that that's going to be right here. It's going to change right here. And then what I want to do is I want to take all this data and I want to bring it back and put it right here, right? So basically this is simply a copy of the data. All right, I want to do that as well, so we're going to go ahead and do that. Let's go into the VBA in a moment. Let me just show you real quick. Okay, so I used match here to get that contact. I use a match, and all we did was match the contact ID. Now the contact ID is a named range in that. When we look under the formulas, go into the name manager, we just have one name range, and we use offset because this is going to grow. This is going to grow, so we use offset. It will count the number of cells with text, and it will go. So as we add to this, it will grow and grow and grow. So the contact ID, and the reason we also add 1, this starts on row 2, so we want to know once we locate that, once we locate the ID right here, we're using this ID, the selected ID, we add 1 to that because we start in row 2, right? Our first contact starts in row 2, so we want the row number. So the first one is in row number 2, the second one is in row number 3. That is why when we use match, we add 1. When we use match, we add 1, and we're just going to wrap that in an if error. If there's an error to that formula, for some reason it's not found, we just want to make sure that we put an empty so that VBA doesn't run into any issues. We can just test if it's blank. That's all we need to do. If it's blank, then we know there's an error when it comes to VBA. I also want to know if it's a new contact or not. Okay, that's important. So when we click new contact, this goes to true. I want to know if it's a new contact because when I save it, I need to know if I should assign a new contact ID or not, right? So if it's a new contact, right, when we cancel that, this goes back to false. For example, when we make a change, test, right, I need to know we use the same button and the same macro for both update and save, and I'll show you how we do that. It's very cool. But so I need to know if it's an existing contact, use the contact database row in B9. If it's a new contact, if this is true, we need to create a new row, and I'll show you how we did that in the code. So when we update that on existing, it's automatically brought in here. So that is how we do that. Let's go into the VBA and show you what we have there. We'll go over quickly the contact macros because I really want to get into the sharing, and that's really the main focal point of this training. But we'll go over quickly into the developers tab. If you don't have a developers tab, you can reach that from the file into the options and then just go ahead and click on the customize ribbon and you'll find the developers tab. Make sure that is selected. Alt F11 will get you into developers as well, or Visual Basic by clicking here. Here is our VBA. We have a few on sheet macros. When we click on the contacts, we can see just a few. We have a tab, automated tab, and we're not going to go into this because that is. But if you want to see how we created these automatic tabs allows us to go from one to the other, all right? Automatically. That's a great feature. I've already put that in a training. Just look under auto save load tab, auto tab load save. I'll find you the link. It was under one of those, and where we covered a lot of that. So we're not going to cover that because we have so much to cover. But basically, the idea is you go in here and you pull down, and then you just put the range here, whatever the range of the cells and the order, and that's what your tab is going to be. So it's very, very simple. And then we just turn it on and turn it off. Turning on the tab when the worksheet is active. When we deactivate the worksheet, we turn it off. So that's all that the tab is. We only have a little bit of macros on the sheet itself. Basically, when a user makes a selection change to this is our main table inside that contact sheet, and we're just going to put the row B1 for our conditional formatting, and then we're going to load the contact. We're going to run a macro called load contact. That is it for the on-sheet macros. Let's go into the contact macros, and I have all of the macros associated with contacts here. We have new contact, we have save update. Remember, the same macro, either saving a new contact or updating existing one. We're using the same macro, so that's a really great, convenient. We have the cancel new if they've selected a new contact and they decide to cancel it. Right, that's a macro in itself, but it's just a one line of macro. We also have delete contact, right? We have load contact. So load contact, basically it loads the information. When you select, it loads all the contact information in these 6 cells above, as well as the selected contact ID, so 7 in total. We also have refresh contact table. Refresh contact table basically allows us to take information from the database and bring it into the contacts. So that's all that macro does. And what else do we have? We have contact save message. This is just a fade out message. We've been through fade out messages before, but basically when we update a contact, and then we have a message that'll appear, contact save. You see that little fade out message right there? That's a fade out message. There's a training on fade out messages as well, so you can go over that, but it just lets us know that a contact's been saved, or lets the user know without one of those annoying pop-ups that a user has to press OK on. That is all the macros. You see, we can do all that, save, new, delete, with just a little bit of code. I've refined this code over the years onto just the minimum, just what's needed. We're going to go over a little bit quickly on this because I really want to get to the sync data, but I do want to go over that with you. The new contact, all we're doing is clearing out the existing fields, right? We need to clear it out if we're going to put a new one in. Let me pull that up for you. If we want to clear that up, we want to make sure we clear out the field, so we clear that out. And then we also want to make sure we clear out the selected row and select. So we just clear those cells out using clear contents. We want to change the button sets, right? If you'll notice, there's a different button set. This group right here, new, update, and delete are all existing contacts. We use those for existing contacts, right? But if we click new, we use a different group. We just have 2 buttons. We have save and cancel. So this is a new contact group, right? So I've given a name to this group of buttons, and that allows us to show and hide buttons very easily. So new and cancel. 2 groups, 5 buttons total into 2 groups. So those 2 lines of code right here allows us to show and hide those accordingly. So for new contact, we are going to hide the existing group, and we're going to show the new ones. We're going to set B10. Remember, B10 lets us know, is it a new contact or not? We want to set that to true. We want to make sure that new contact, so that we know whether it's a new contact. And then F5, we're going to select, and that just basically allows us to enter the name first. It gives the user a little bit of convenience, so that when we're here and we want a new contact, the first thing they do is enter the name, and it's required. So we've selected F5 automatically to give so the user just has to start typing in. That is why we have decided to select. So that's it for new contact. Very simple. Now, the next is save and update context. Save and update. So we're going to use the same macro for both, but we still have to make sure that we know whether it's a new contact or an existing, and we'll put a test on that in just a moment. The first thing we want to make sure is F5 is empty. I want to make sure that there's at least a name. So if F5, which is the name, if that's empty, we're going to throw up a message box saying please enter a contact name, and then we're going to exit. Okay, we're going to stop the calculations, and if you remember in our old videos, stopping the calculation helps us to make it faster. All we're doing is turning off the calculations and turning off screen updating. We just have to make sure before the macro ends that we reset the calculation, which turns the calculation back to automatic and turns on the screen updating. So that's what that does. So you'll see that often in my code, stop calculation. Now we need to run our test. We have an if and if right here, and we run a test. We need to know if this is a new contact. If B10 is true, then it's a new contact. So the contact database row is going to be the first available row in our database. The first available row, which is right here. So that we're gonna run a test. The last row with the text is 20, and so the +1 is 21. So it's going to tell us 21 is the first available row. So our database row is 21 if it's new. So we do that if it's new. And also we need to know sheet A, we need to know what the new ID is. What is the new ID? Now we want a unique contact ID for everyone. We need to make sure. How can we assure that the next ID is new? We can use the max, and I'll show you how to do that. So our next ID is located in B8. Let's take a look in B8 and see what is in there. That is the max. We use the max formula there, and into the contacts we go, and under B8 what we're saying is the max of the contacts IDs +1. So all it's going to say is the maximum. What is the maximum of all of these? In this case it's 19, and then +1 is 20. So that's going to give us our next contact ID, so we know we have a unique contact ID for each and every one of those. That's going to be very helpful moving forward. You always want to have a unique ID, and especially when you have a database, like if you tend to change customer names, if you have invoices or things like that, you use the contact ID because the contact ID won't change, so that you always have the right contact along. That way you have the ability to change the name, and then records associated like that, like invoices, like payments, like scheduling, are always going to be with the same contact even when you change the name. So it's really a good idea to use a unique ID that's hidden, that the user cannot change, and so it's really, really important. So that's why we do that there. Okay, next up. So if the existing is new, we're going to do the new contact row, the first available, and we're going to assign it a new contact date. Else, if it's existing, then we do two things. Then, first of all, we want to make sure that B9, if it's empty, if there's no row associated with that, remember that B9 is our contact row. I just want to exit that sub. Actually, look, if we exit the sub, we have stopped. Let's do one more thing. We should actually reset the calculation. Remember, before you exit the sub, reset. We have two choices. We can do reset calculation here, right? So we can do that, or we can bring stop calculation past here, right? We can do that too. If we don't stop it, then we don't need to reset it. Let's do that. So we have two choices, because I like less code. So because there's not much going on here, there's not much to slow down. So we can exit the sub without resetting it, and then we move stop calculation, which is calculation to manual and screen updating. So we'll bring that down here, and then we don't need to reset it, which is kind of nice. So if we know if it's an existing contact, then the contact database row we already know is in B9. Remember, B9 is our contact row here. B9, that's our database row. So we know that if it's an existing one, we know that based on using the match. So we're going to determine our contact database row is either, if it's new, we're going to give it the first range. If it's an existing, we already have it. That's all we need to do. Now the rest, it doesn't matter whether it's a new contact or whether it's an existing contact. Everything else is the same, and that's really helpful. So all we're going to do is we're going to run for next, and we've mapped out these fields. And I'll show you how that works. I've showed you before, but I want to show you again because it can get a little bit confusing. We've done data mapping. The idea is this. ID is in column 1, customer name in 2, address in 3. So let's go ahead and center these. It looks a little bit better, but it doesn't really matter. It's a database. Maybe nobody will see it. So the idea is that 1, 2, 3, 4. So we know the column numbers that this is. That's very important. So if our customer name is in column number 2 and the address is column number 3, I need to map that. I need to know that this is column number 2, and I need to know that this is column number 3 in the database. So we've mapped it right here. Database column mapping. Customer name is 2, address is 3. Right? So we know that. So if we are here, and this is column equals column number 6. This is column number 6, right? This is column number 6. And we know if we look exactly 10 columns ahead that it's 2. Remember, this is column 16 equals column. Right. So that means, let's go back here. So that means if we go the existing column, right? Column 6 plus 10 is 2, right? The customer name is 2, the address is 3, the city is 4. So this maps out which column in our database, and basically this is just a quick way of writing less code. A little bit more work on the front end, but much less code, because what I want to do is this. I want to run through each column I want to go from column 6 to column, let's see, 7, 8, 9, from column 6 to 9, and I want to go from row 5 to 7 to 9. So I want to basically loop through these 6 fields. I want to loop through them. For each one, I want to get the column of the database. I know the row of the database, right? The row is it's going to either be this on a new, or it's going to be, if it's an existing, it's going to be here, right? So we know we've already defined the row. We need the column of the database, and the column's right here. So all we're doing, and I've done this in a few trainings before, all we're going to do is loop. I'm going to use 2 loops, one for columns from column 6 to column 9, and one loop from row 5 to row 7 to row 9. So remember, 6, we're going to go from 6 to 9, but we're gonna step 3 because there's nothing here and there's nothing here. So 6 to 9, step 3, from 5 to 7 to 9, step 2. So I just need 2 loops to go real quickly through that, and I've done that right here. For the row equals 5 to 9, step 2. That means skip. That means go from 5 to 7 to 9. We want to skip that. We also want to go through the columns from column 6 to 9, and step 3. That means only 6 and 9. Basically, it's just going to go from 6 to 9 very easily. So then we only have to write 1 line of code. That means the sheet 2, the contact database row, we know that row, and the column. What is the column? The column is the contact row, whatever row we're on, plus the contact column, plus 10. Remember, 10 aways is where we map that. What value is this? What is the value of this? The value of this is right here. The value of that is right here. Right here. Right? It's either 2, or it's 3, or it's 4, or 5, or 6, or 7. Those are the columns in our database, right? 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, right? So those are the columns. So that now we know what the column is. We've mapped out the columns. We have the row. We know exactly where to put those values. So this is the column. We have the row, we have the column, and we know what the value is, right? So this is where it's going to be located, and what are we going to do? The cells plus the contact row, the contact column. So we're going to loop through that, and just basically all that's going to do is put the data in the database. That's all it's going to do. And we're just going to go 2 loops, and that's it. We're done. So it's very quick, very simple, very easy. When we do that kind of data mapping, it lowers, it's a little bit more work on the cell on the cells, but it runs much faster and it's much less to code. B10, we're going to set the new it's no longer a new contact because we've just created it, so we want to make sure to set that to false. And we also want to set the time. This is going to be handy. I need to know that we just made a change. So we just made a change, so we're going to put the time, and I'll show you how that's going to help in the future, but that's important. The last change, we just made a change, so we want to put the current date and the current time right here. So that's important. So we're going to put that right there into B12. And next up, we want to make sure that we change our toolbars. If it's a new contact, we want to make sure the existing group of buttons are displayed. And if it was a new context, for sure we just created it, so it's no longer going to be a new contact. So we want to make sure the new contact group is no longer visible. And then we're going to run a macro called sync to database, and then we're going to run a macro called refresh contact table, and then reset the calculator, and then we're going to display the contact saved messages. So we have 3 macros to run. Reset calculator, you saw that already. That's just basically turning on automatic calculations and turning on screen updating. So we know what's in there. We haven't showed you what sync to database is yet. And refresh contact table, I did show you that briefly, and all of that is all we're doing is we're going to clear out whatever's in D13 through J99, and we're going to take whatever's in, we're going to determine the last row of the database, and then we're going to copy everything over. And I'll show you that, what we're doing, and then I'll show you again in the code. We are going to clear out, let's go ahead and hide this for now. And we're going to clear out everything in here. Remember, this is not our data, so we can clear it out, right? I can easily clear it out. It doesn't matter. I can just refresh it and then it all comes back. So it's no problem there. So we can clear that out. So the first part of the code just simply clears all of the data out. And then what I want to do is I want to determine the last row here, and I want to take all the data here and bring it over into there. And I don't want to use copy and paste. I want to use values because we're just copying the values, and it's also quicker. So we're going to bring this value over. We know we're starting on row 2 here, and we're going to row 20 here. We are starting on row 14, so row 13. So if we start on row 13 here, we need to make sure that we are adding 11 because we're starting much higher than we are starting on here, 2 and 13. So we're going to do just that within the code here. So we're going to clear out the table just like I did there. We're going to determine the last row of the data in the database in sheet 2. Then we're going to do is we're going to take D13 plus the last row plus 11, right? Plus 11 because we're starting much higher, and that equals A2 through G in the last row of the data. So all this does is copy over the data. So when we refresh this, and I've assigned this macro of refresh contact table to this button here, right click, not duplicate it, right click, and then inside assign macro, and you'll see this is sync from database, but that includes that as well. Sync from database, and we'll go, and that also includes the refresh contact table. So we'll go over that. So that brings the data right back in. So that is refresh database. So all we want to do is make sure that when we make a change here, we want to make sure that any change that we make is also brought back into this table here. So that is why we use refresh contact table. After we save or update a contact, we need to make sure that those changes are made. So we're also going to run sync to database, and let's go ahead and go over that, and we'll go over that in a moment. Let's continue with the contact macros. Cancel new, all we do is select E13, because when we select E13, automatically we have a macro that runs. And so if we're in a new contact and we click new 13, it's just the same thing, new contact. Cancel new is the same exact thing as it would be selecting an existing. So all I need to do is write a macro that does just that, E13 select. So I've done just that, E13 select. Deleting contact, well, we want to, that's very easy also. We need to make sure that there is actually a contact, that we have an exact row. B9 tells us our contact row, which is right here under B9. Remember that tells us our contact database row right here. So that's our match. B9 tells us row. So we want, if there's an error, it's going to be blank. So what we want to do is first run a test to make sure that it's not blank. And if it's not, then we can go ahead and delete it. You may want to put in a message box, something like, are you sure you want to delete this contact? I didn't do that, but you very well may want to do that, as I've done in the past. So we determine the contact database row in B9, and then all we do is sheet 2, we delete that row, contact database row and contact database row delete. And then we update the last local change, right? We've made a change to the database, so we want to update that time. We need to know when that was updated. That is important for syncing, and I'll show you that in a minute, but there's a reason we're showing the current time in B12. E13 is select, that means we just select the last. We sync to the database and we refresh the contact. And sync to database, I haven't gone over that yet. Loading the contact, we clear the current contact information out. We update the button set. We pull in whatever contact row that we have. We determine the contact rows in B1, and then we load the contact row. And I'll show you how that's done, but we use data mapping once again, but a different type of data mapping. Let me show you that as well. That is in 11. This is a hidden row. And you'll see here I've mapped out. These are all mapped out. This tells me customer name is located in, we can delete the column number, we don't need that anymore. F5 is the contact name. I5 is the address, and so on. F7 is the city. So I've mapped out here under a hidden row all of the cells. So all I need to do is when I'm loading a contact, I just need to go from here. I'm going to put the ID right in A, let's see, a B, contact ID goes in B2. Contact ID goes in B2, everything else goes up there. Let's make these small, we don't need to hide them, just make them small. Okay, so we know where the contact ID goes, and everything else, all other 6 other fields go in here, and we've mapped those out. So we need to know 11. So I'm going to run a loop. We're going to run a loop from column 5 through column 10, 5 through 10. We're going to run a loop through that. And each one we're going to say, okay, in row 11, in column 5, put whatever is here, whatever in our selected line, put that in F5, right? Whatever is in our selected row, put it in I5, so on and so forth. So we run a loop using mapping. We've done just that in the code. I've run a for next loop from contact column from 5 to 10. Then we're going to say range. The column is 11, the row is 11. That's where our mapping contains. And we're going to say the contact column, what is the value? What is this value? Cells 11, contact column, what is the value? That value is going to be an address, F5, right? Or I7, whatever that is going to be here, right? We're going to put that is the range. And so that range equals the current contact row in the current cell. So basically all that does is what I said is put whatever, it's going to run a loop, right? It's going to run a loop from column 5 to column 10, from 5 to 10. It's going to, whatever's in our selected row, it's going to take that and it's going to determine where it goes, and it's going to put it right here or here or here or here or here. So that is exactly what that does. You can follow it along. I know I'm moving quickly, but there's some more important things that we need to get to, and we're already a good 30 minutes into this training. So it's going to be a long one. Get your coffee, don't fall asleep. All right, continuing on. B2, we want to make sure we put in our contact ID so we know what the contact is. That's going to go into B2. That's important. And B10, we want to make sure that we set, it's no longer, if we've selected an existing contact, it is no longer a new contact, just in case we were at a new contact. So we want to make sure to set B10 as false, and we're no longer a new contact. Next, we've done contact refresh, and we've done contact save messages. So that is it for all of the contact macros, and that is basically how we go through our contacts, whether it's new contact, update, delete, and refresh. So that is how we do all of that. Let's get into the most important part, which is sync, and that's done relatively easily in just 2 basic macros. We have 2 basic macros. We have sync to database and sync from database. The idea is this, that we want to either take this data and bring it into our database. Our database is this. Remember, our database is that Excel file, that custom data XLS that we've browsed for. We've browsed for it. We know we want to make sure that everything gets in this custom data XLS. We want to put the data there. Okay, that's sync to database. Now, sync from database is I want to take whatever is in that Excel file, whatever's in that Excel file, and put it right here. Sync from database takes that Excel file and puts it there. So those are the two macros that we need to do. We either need to put information into the database or we need to pull information. So we're either pushing data into the database or we're pulling it from the database. So let's go ahead and go over to sync to database, and this is how we've done it. Now, before we do it, we've defined some objects for the file system. If you follow any of the last 4 videos under the file system object, if you have not, it's a great training on file systems where we created a file manager, and that was really amazing. So make sure you check that out as well. We did cover the file system a lot, and so we're going to do a little bit on that today, just because we need to get an update date from the file. We're going to create some connections. We need to create a data connection. So we're going to we've dimensioned the connection and the record set as objects. And then we've 2 dates. We need to compare some 2 dates. I need to know what our last database update was and our last local change. That means the change. Our last local change is right here. Remember, we've been updating that, and I told you the last local change is right here. So every time we make a change, whether we're updating a contact or creating a new contact or deleting a contact, those 3 types of changes, every time we do that, I put the now time in right here. Into B12 is the now. So that tells us, okay, we just made a change. So that's important. We need to know when that change was made. So that's done. So the change is made, and then so that's why we need last local change and the last database update. So if another user has updated their Excel file, I need to know when they made that change as well. Right? I need to know if there was a change. I need to know, and where is that? That is right here. Let's go ahead and do the shared workbooks. I need to know this right here. If somebody in our shared folder made a change here, let's say 610.345, and let's say their change, right? Let's say they made a change 5 minutes ago, and we made a change 15 minutes ago. Well, I need to make sure their change takes precedence. So I need to say, okay, before we delete, before we do anything, take in their changes and bring it in our database, then make our changes. So we need to know this date modified. That's critical. Right? So it's important to get that time right. So we need to know what time there is. So that we're going to use that as the last modified date of the database, when the database was last modified. So we need the last database update. We're going to get that date. Now, when we sync to the database, we need to first of all, we need to get the database file, and that's an M5. Remember, that's the entire file path of our database. So that's always important. So every user will need to do that. We need to know M5. What is the entire file path of that database? So that's important. Without that, we can't. When you do this for your workbook, make sure you run a check here. I didn't get into that. Make sure you run a check. Make sure it's valid, and make sure it's not blank. You'll want to put some checks on that. So go ahead and do that. So the database file is that. There we go. So the database file is M5. The last local change, I just showed you that, B12. Remember, that's the last time we located. And now what we're going to do is we're going to set that object file system. This just creates a scripting object. It basically allows us to get access to our folders because I need to know what the change date was. We're going to set the object file to our database file. This is our database, right? We need to access that. I need to know this. Then I want to run a check. Once I have this information, object files database, that is this right here. All I've done is said, okay, this is it. Get this. Because I'm going to need information from this. So we've just told VBA that we want to work with this file right here. What do we want from that file? I want the last modified date, and I want to know something about it. If the object file, right, date last modified, date is less than the local change. Right? That means if it's older, that means if ours is newer, right? If our file is newer and we have a newer change than them, then we can go ahead and we can delete it and make sure we replace it with a newer one, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to say, okay, there's no new changes. That means there's no new changes on our database file. There's no, let me make that a little bit smaller. There's no new changes here. So that means we can take this data right here, create a new database file, delete the old one, and create a new one and put it in place. So we can do just that. So that's all that code does. Kill, it deletes the current database version. Then it's going to take this workbook sheet's customer database and it's going to copy. It's going to take this sheet, only this sheet. We're going to create a copy of it into a new workbook. And then we're going to put that workbook, and we're going to say the file format here is, it means 51 is XLSX. Okay? And then we're going to save that, and we're going to close that file. So that's all it does. Right? So we're going to copy this workbook. We're going to save the file name, save as the file name, the same name as before. Remember, we need to delete it first. We cannot copy and place it in the folder if there's an active copy. So we need to make sure we kill, or in other words, delete the current database version before we create a new one. So we're going to copy the sheet. Then we're going to take the current, not the current workbook, the current sheet, right? This workbook, just the sheet, only that one sheet. And we're going to save that sheet as the same name, database file, and then we're going to give it a file format of 51, which is XLSX. We don't need macros in this workbook. It's just a simple Excel. We want it to open quickly, we want it to save quickly, and we don't want any, we just want a very, very simple database. So we're going to give it XLSX, and then we're going to close it. We're going to make sure that closes. So when we do that, all we need to do is run it. We're just going to click that, and it runs really quick, and that's it. And that's only if, that our file is newer than the old file. Okay, but what if it's not? What if the old file is newer, right? What if the object last modified is newer, greater than the last local change? Then what I need to do is I need to take the information that is in that database. I need to take the information that is in here and bring it right here. Okay, let's make a little change. Let's just do 20. Right? And this is in our database, right? And Randy and us. Okay. So let's save that. That's just the straight database change. Now we've made an update to that, right? So now when we run that code, I need to know, okay, if it's, now we just made a change, so we know that right now 6:10, 4:16 p.m. That's newer, right? That's newer. And what about, when's the last change in our, the last change is 6:9, right? 3:45. So that's much older, right? So that's going to tell us, hey, we need to, before we make any changes here, we need to pull in the newer data first. The newer data first must come in. So we're going to do just that. So it's going to say, if the last modified date is greater than the last local date, which it is, then we need to do that. So when we run that, let's go ahead and pull up the database right here. And so when we run this, we just click run, and then that database is going to be added right here. You see how that was added? Because we need to know. So I just ran this code. So let's go ahead and go over this code. So that is the reason for that. The last local change, again, we're going to define it in B12. We'll set the database file, which is M5, same as the other ones. Again, we're gonna get the scripting object because we need these two lines to get that last modified date of the database. And again, we're gonna run our if statement, but this is the opposite if statement. If the last modified date is greater, then run it. Then what do we want to do? We create a connection. This is called an ADO database connection, and it's basically what we're doing is we're going in here. We're going into data, and we're creating a connection, right? A new connection, right? We're going to create this connection. We've created, this is what we're doing, but we're doing it through VBA. We're going to connect the database. So that is what we're doing, but we're doing it through VBA. So once we create, and this allows us to pull in the data from the database without actually opening up the file, which is actually really fast and really convenient. So to do that, we need to set our object connection, and then which connects to the actual file, which will connect to the file, and we need to create a record set. So we need to create these two connections first. And then on the connection, we need to open it. And this tells us what provider. This is the newest version, and this would cover Excel 2007 and above. I think you would use 8.0 and something if you're using less than 2007. So if you have an older version, older than Excel 2007, well, maybe you should update it. But if you're not updating it, like using 2003, you will have to make a change here. I believe you'll have to use 8.0 and maybe something different than ACE. But this will cover any Excel version in the last 10 years. And I've tested it on newer versions too, as well as 64-bit should work just fine on that as well. So what is our data source? Our data source is that Excel file in M5. That is the source. And also we're going to say extended properties. This is basically, we said yes, our database includes headers, right? So we've done that, and then the IMAX equals 0. Not too important, but just include it. Then the record set. Okay, so now we've connected the database. We know, but what records do we can include? So we're going to select from sheet. The sheet is customer database. That's from the sheet. There is no specific range because we're going to just do the whole sheet, although you could specify a specific range as well, although we've kept it pretty simple, just from the sheet. And then we're going to set the object connection. We don't need these, so we'll get rid of those. And those are optional, but for our purposes, we don't need them. And then what we're going to do is we're going to say, okay, with this record set, I want to copy them. I want to copy them. And so we're going to say sheet 2, A2, copy. So we're going to go into A2 right here, A2, and we're going to copy that from the record set. So all we're doing is copying the data from our database into our main file here. So we're doing that right here from the record set. So all that does is copy. And then we're going to close the connections. We want to make sure that we close the connections. Those are important. And then what we're going to do is we're going to refresh the contact table, right? So we've got the information here, but I want it also here because we probably may end up hiding this sheet, but I want it here. I want it here. So that's how we do it. So that's how we get all the information in. We have dues, so that's easily. So when we make a sheet, right? New contact, update contact, all of the information will run into this, and then it will update the database. And this allows us to use multiple users. That's it. With just those two simple macros, that is how we can create a shared workbook with any type of file or any type of folder, and that gives us extreme amount. You should add more protections in here. You will need, in your file, you will, like if you're going to release an application, you will definitely want to make protections. Protections on the sheet, protections on the database. So I've given you, the ability to do that, but if you're going to release an application, you will need a lot more security, right? Because obviously users cannot maybe access this or cannot delete this. You will need to protect lots of forms and files, columns. So the protections will be critical. You'll want to do that as well. But that is basically it. We've gone through every macro. Browse for folder. This is just a simple macro that allows us to pull in our file into M5. So that I've been before. That's pretty basic. And so that is it. Oh, one other thing. On Workbook Open, right? You may want to sync, like every time this workbook opens in your file, you're going to want to sync from the database. You want to pull in any new data that's been recently. I've commented this out, but if you have a running application, when you open the workbook, go ahead and uncomment this out so that your database is automatically updated as soon as you open the workbook. That's kind of important. So, but I'm going to comment it out. I don't want this to run when you open your file. So there's no need for it to run when you're just learning, but eventually it's something that you'll want to do. And that is it. This macro just sets the tabbing. This is for tabbing when the workbook is activated and only on the contact sheet. That way, no other contact sheet. And that is pretty much it. So this is probably one of the most powerful trainings. If you can see the power of this, you can design extremely powerful, extremely professional workbooks that rival any major software out there, because you now have the tools to use one of Excel's biggest limitations, but you now have the power to create massive applications that users can share all over the world with the same worksheet and a linked database. It's extremely powerful. So I'm really, really glad you're able to see this. All I ask is that you do share this training, whether you're on YouTube or Facebook. Please share it, please like it, and I always appreciate your comments below. And thank you so much for joining us today.